SpaceX has blown our minds by being creative enough to build a powerful Starship rocket that has never been reflected anywhere in any historical record. Elon Musk, a human gift to our beloved Earth, is the master planner of every creative concept you could think of about the Starship. And his company SpaceX is on a mission to conquer space and colonize Mars. Only a spiritualist who has the magical power will think of doing this, but to burst your brain, SpaceX will use the myths in technology to make the Martian surface human-friendly, where we all will settle and live a fulfilling life. And guess what? The Tesla car will be the only car anyone will drive on Mars. Returning to the candy tasty topic, what is the next generation Starship all about that SpaceX has fully revealed, and how will it dramatically change the concept of space travel among other generations of Starship? Join us in another episode today. Relax and watch things unfold, as all these questions will be answered. We will talk about the type of newly released Starship. In this concept is the Starship 2.0, which SpaceX has decided to launch. You can say it's a Pro Max of the first Starship prototype, but SpaceX has intended to use it and turn around the goal of space travel. In January, the Air Force granted SpaceX $102 million to research using the Starship as a cargo ship that could send goods to various places all over the world in a matter of minutes, or as point-to-point transportation, with trips that might cost as little as $2 million per launch. Elon Musk, the CEO of SpaceX, has stated that a larger rocket could eventually follow SpaceX's gigantic Starship and Super Heavy launch vehicle. Musk claims that a potential next-generation SpaceX Starship, which may arrive a few years after the Starship and be extremely massive, could be a full 18 meters wide, or twice as broad as its predecessor, and it will be nicknamed the Starship 2.0. Starship 2.0 will have 8 times the surface area and 8 times the propellant tank volume of a Starship 1.0, requiring roughly 8 times as much thrust and making the vehicle 8 times as heavy, assuming the Starship's successor maintains its best ratio. Many people will recall that doubling a circle's diameter quadruples its area and adds a doubling of height. The new Starship will be 18 meters in diameter and terrifyingly close to 236 meters tall, more than twice the height of the Saturn V, which is equivalent to the Woolworth building in New York and 75% of the size of the Eiffel Tower in Paris. It's 18 meters in diameter, which would also make it the widest rocket ever built. A basic estimate would put the gross or fuel mass of the Starship 2.0 at a mind-blowing 40,000 metric tons. The update for the Starship 2.0 might be able to launch over 1,000 tons every launch, and the number of passengers in each batch on the Starship 2.0 will also increase to 1,000 persons. With this Starship, Musk will be able to reach his Mars ambitions more quickly. Since the existing Starship can only carry approximately 100 passengers at once, it will require about 10,000 flights to reach his goal of 1 million colonists on Mars. SpaceX will use 33 Raptor 2 engines to power the Super Heavy first stage and 6 Raptor 2 engines to power the Starship's upper stage for initial test flights. The Ship 2.0, however, can cut the number of trips needed. The booster would require a minimum of 100 Raptors or more to launch if SpaceX were to use the present generation of Raptors to power such a massive rocket. The volume of usable space within the Starship is a whopping 1,000 cubic meters, big enough to fit the entire Eiffel Tower disassembled, of course, and that's got scientists very excited. The whole vehicle can lift 100 metric tons or 220,000 pounds of cargo and people into space on routine low-cost missions. The idea that Starships are built to be huge and cheap to launch space rockets that have evolved in the race of mankind is central to many of these beliefs. It will take a very long time for the average class to be able to pay for a space trip inside a Starship, even though only the extremely wealthy can afford such a trip. Astronomers and companies have been working extremely hard to create effective probes and satellites that are light and tiny. All those wonderful origami features will suddenly look overly dangerous and expensive once Starship is available as a launch option. Everyone will have to recalculate the restrictions and likely find that the Starship era's space technology needs to be simpler, beefier and dumber. When fully stacked, a massive rocket measuring 9 meters broad is difficult for SpaceX to launch. They're currently flying beyond what the authorities will permit. In other words, in the grand scope of things, it wasn't too difficult to launch the considerably smaller second stage powered by 3 Raptor 1 engines. When fully fueled, ready to go, or launched, you definitely won't want to be too close to it, because the 33 Raptor 2 engine first stage sounds like a beast. Even the much smaller Falcon 9 shakes the ground kilometers away during a launch. Elon enjoys talking, but the fact that the Starship is 120 meters tall and 9 meters wide already pushes back success, since it will be fighting gravity to get to orbit. This passive expansion of the rocket's size may be a waste of resources, engineering effort, and absurdly unacceptable rise in the dangers associated with launching the craft and the resources and personnel invested in a single vessel. The Starship will boost space exploration more than ever by increasing weight and payload capacity. Space exploration has been constrained by weight and size since the first satellites were launched in the late 1950s. Up to 7 people can travel on board NASA's Space Shuttle, which has a payload capacity of around 65,000 pounds. It had a sizable cargo bay where the building blocks for the International Space Station could be stored. Suppose humanity is serious about extending into space and establishing settlements on the Moon and elsewhere in the solar system, it requires a spacecraft capable of transporting everything necessary for the operation. One single journey aboard the Starship can accommodate a total of 100 astronauts. According to SpaceX, it can launch payloads into orbit that weigh more than 100 tons. However, this rocket cannot only transport a greater number of people or a heavier payload than a typical rocket. It also has sufficient room to transport massive structures and full gear. The Starship is also one of a kind since it can take off from Earth, begin its journey, return to Earth's orbit to refuel at a tanker ship, and then continue to Mars. After it has successfully landed on Mars, it will be able to refuel using the resources available on Mars and then fly back to Earth. Test flights in orbit are essential to the success of a Starship and mark the beginning of the process of making the rocket more effective. The more time a Starship takes off into space, its technology will become more advanced. The route that SpaceX will take to get to Mars is now more defined than it has ever been. The journey will begin with an orbital flight in 2022, continue with people landing on the Moon in 2025, and then proceed to Mars. Building a ferry barge in orbit for modularly transporting material and personnel with redundant life support systems would be much more sensible. Additionally, it would make more sense to have multiple Starships dock onto this barge to transport back and forth from Earth to Moon and Earth to Mars voyages. If there were always multiple Starship launches, there would be endless redundancy in vital propulsion and emergency fuel and power backup. And everything that was going to be transported on barges would, in the beginning, be brought on Starships of the design that were in use at the time. Consequently, whatever it is that needs to be moved must be designed to be capable of being swiftly disassembled and reassembled into its original form. When it comes to becoming a multiplanetary species, there is one thing in particular that is very important for us to understand, and that is the effect of microgravity and low gravity, as well as the various forms of radiation, solar, interstellar, have on the human reproductive system. A straightforward internet search of mammalian reproduction in space or microgravity returns a staggeringly small number of results. 50 billion years. Yet no one has even attempted to have mice reproduce in space for a couple of generations. The development of engineering of ever larger rockets is one thing, but preventing our species from becoming a sickly and deformed biomass that dies off in less than half a century in space or on Mars is a big problem. SpaceX and NASA scientists have to find an effective remedy. This is a challenge that both organizations are working to solve. Do you think SpaceX will be able to fly the fully stacked Starship into orbit this year? To accomplish this, SpaceX is doing great improvements from Starship S20 to S24 that no one talks about, and they are insane. Just click on this video to know more.